Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming at you again live from Film Fanatic headquarters. It is a Friday at about 10:30. TGIF. It's a pretty rainy, poopy day. I think well, at least in the forecast, it was supposed to be all rainy and snowy today, but it's still really warm. It's very spring-like. We had like 50-degree weather the other day, so it's pretty awesome. This winter's been super mild as far as snow. We've only had, I don't know, maybe two or three, maybe two like big snowstorms, but it's been pretty mild. And we've had some days where we've had, you know, a few inches here and there, but it's been pretty mild. There hasn't been any, one factor about living in Maine, and if you're, a musician, is, especially during the winter, is cancellations because of weather, with snowfalls and, ice nights or days where, we have the sleet, the black ice. But I don't know, thankfully for what it's been this season, and it's been a pretty good season so far for wintertime, which is really surprising. There's been a couple of new venues that have opened up here in Maine and locally that have, been really great with keeping local artists and musicians, for the most part, employed through the winter. So it's been pretty cool. There's been a couple of new places that have opened. One in particular, the Gypsy Rose in Camden, which is a really new venue that just opened about a month ago, and they have been cranking it out. They've been having really been pushing the whole entertainment thing. They started off with opening with an open mic, which they have every week, and now it's turned into a regular venue, and they're booking bands every pretty much every weekend, and it's been really cool. It's been a really cool development, and there's like seems like slowly every week there's a scene developing there. There's actually people coming out. My band Quantum was one of the first bands that played there, which was, just surprising and kind of funny. But we did a show there a couple of weeks ago, and we were like, I think we might have been the first or second like band that played there. We played there with my friend Spencer, and we did an electronic night, and it was pretty good. We didn't get, it's a new thing, it's a new venue, totally new, it's a whole new endeavor. So obviously it takes a while to get for places to kind of get, to get around by word of mouth, and you get a little bit of reputation, or you get some legs underneath, underneath the new venture, and then hopefully it just keeps, you plant the seeds, and hopefully it will keep growing. So we played really early on, right after they pretty much opened, and we didn't get the turnout we wanted, but we still had a good crowd, and it felt really well. It felt like things went really well. It was a lot of fun. We, looking forward to try to do some more things there. Uh, and since then, I've noticed I've gone to two shows since then. I've actually been to quite a few shows there since then. One before, and then a few other shows that they've had since then with full bands, and they typically have bands on Saturday nights, and I've noticed each time I've gone, there's been more and more people coming out, and it's very very cool. And it's funny because I know like what we do with our band Quantum is probably in some ways as far removed from that kind of thing as humanly possible in a lot of ways. We as a band, we definitely have the rock influence. I mean, rock music and all things under that label. At the end of the day, I feel like I'm a rock guy. I love all kinds of music, but that's kind of my roots, mostly in the more extreme rock side of things, like metal oriented kind of stuff. growing up listening to lots of death metal and especially black metal. Black metal, I love all kinds of extreme heavy music, but black metal is probably, as far as extreme music or heavier music, black metal is like my favorite style. I love death metal. That's always been in my blood and always will be. Some of my favorite death metal bands are, bands like Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse, Obituary. Morbid Angel is probably one of my favorite bands of all time, and I have been revisiting them lately more and more. And I'm actually, fingers crossed, going to see them this year, which will be just insane because I have had such a connection to that band since I was a kid. And if it all happens and all works out with us getting tickets and going to the show, I don't know, it's going to be weird because it's going to be amazing and I'm super excited, but it's going to be kind of like a weird, I don't know, like an out of body experience just because of the connection I've had to that band. And I had an opportunity to see them a few years ago and things fell through and I was bummed out about it. But, with the electronic music, that's obviously the biggest thing. But all of those styles are a big part of what we do. So we do have a rock influence. Getting outside of the metal thing, I really love bands like, of course, Black Sabbath and T-Rex, Led Zeppelin, Echo and the Bunnymen. I mean, all kinds of great stuff. But and that stuff always has, even bands like Weezer. All that stuff has a huge influence as far as the rock component of what we do as Quantum. Like that stuff has a real big influence. There are a few songs even that I can think of that are probably songs that are a little bit more on the recent side, but there's quite a few tunes that we've written, and one song in particular that was really inspired by, T-Rex, for instance. I was writing this one song for a while, and I wanted to kind of go. I was listening to tons of T-Rex. T-Rex is one of my favorite rock bands from the '70s. Mark Bolan, he was the creative mind behind that band, and just a genius. David Bowie, also a huge influence on what we do as Quantum, as far as like the rock influence. The so those two bands in particular have huge influence on what we do. And there's like at least two or three songs that I can think of that are directly inspired by T-Rex and David Bowie. David Bowie has an overall universal influence on what we do. Everything from like the idea around trying to bring a lot of variety to the music, keeping the stuff, as far as lyrics and the presentation, keeping things a little bit more ambiguous, where songs that I write can be very much influenced by or about very, very specific, personal situations or feelings that I have. But I've always loved Bowie so much. He's pretty much my all-time favorite. I've always loved Bowie so much because he can write. I did a big show on David Bowie a few months ago on this documentary, Moon Age Daydream, which is just mind-blowingly good. And the thing that I always loved about Bowie and the biggest influence that I've gotten from him is how, he can write songs that might be deeply, deeply personal, say, or about a very specific kind of, thing that he's gone through in his life or in his life. But he keeps things kind of ambiguous. Like there's always an air of mystery, at least how I've always kind of perceived his music. The songs are always, in his lyrical content, they're poetry, but I always feel like there's an essence of where it has this enigmatic kind of presentation. It has a very ambiguous flow to it, where it could mean lots of different things for people, and there's like, I feel like as an individual, you can have your own individual experience around his lyrics, Whereas, like, obviously, there are singer songwriters out there that write songs where you can tell right away, oh, this is a love song, or this is a song about the birth of my first child, or those kinds of things. And that can work, and that and depending on the context. And I love songwriting uh, structures or songwriting narratives that are in that particular kind of light. But my deep love, or the thing that I gravitate towards to more, is when I can listen to an artist and they have a very kind of ambiguous presentation, and it leaves, I find, for myself as a listener and as a fan, it leaves a lot of room for me to kind of interpret what's going on, and I might always get a different kind of experience around it. David Bowie, I think he was a master of that. And his thing of where he always reinvented himself. He was always pushing the boundaries, always had some kind of theatrical aesthetic behind his presentation, visually and then also musically. Again, those are direct and major influences for me as far as Quantum. Will never be as good as what the legacy that he left behind, but at the end of the day, that's, like, for me, the biggest thing that I've taken away from his amazing body of work. So, yeah, so I mean, getting back to what I was saying about Gypsy Rose, they're obviously there. That's more of a rock venue, and they're doing more and more blues rock and folk rock stuff. But over at the end of the day, even though we have those influences, and I very much love that kind of music, it's quite a bit different. So, looking forward to doing some more shows, hopefully at some point at that venue. Gypsy Rose is I love it. I'm trying to support it. They've had some great bands play there. I have some friends that are heavily involved with the venue itself, as far as booking shows and also playing there. And it's a great time. It's a great scene. The food is amazing. The acoustics are really great. So, you know, looking forward to seeing where, this this path can go, and so we'll see. And since I'm, talking about music things, get a couple updates as far as in the world of Quantum. So we just it was just announced, I think 2 days ago on Facebook, but there's a festival that's been going on in Belfast called the All Roads Festival, and it's basically run by Meg Charette. And Meg Charette is a woman who I've actually known for a really long time. She, when I first met her years ago, she was running and kind of the co-owner of this really awesome art gallery in Bangor, Maine. And when I first met her, and it was probably, I don't know, it was quite a few years ago. It's probably like 6 or 7 years ago when she was doing music at this one venue. And I had met her a couple of years before that at like some shows or, through Facebook and things. And I knew at the time she was like kind of involved with, working with bands and booking bands. And she started doing these shows at this art gallery in Bangor. And Quantum played there a few times. We played there about 2 or 3 times, and we had a lot of a lot of great things come out of that. It was a lot of fun. It was a really cool art space. We were on the bill with a few other bands, and it was a great time. It was an awesome time. And then she moved from Bangor to Portland, and then her career kind of really catapulted into where she was booking shows for Port City Music Hall, and she was also involved with, like, I believe, the State Theater. The State Theater is one of the biggest venues in Maine. She became, when she moved to Portland, she became a full-on music promoter and booking agent, and she became kind of a major player in the state, especially out of Portland. And about 7 or 8 years ago, there used to be a a festival in Belfast, Maine. That was called the Free Range Festival, and that was a really awesome festival because it was run by some local people in the arts, and the whole showcase of of that festival was 2 days, where they booked bands, touring bands, but then the focus was on all of the really fantastic original bands that were in the area at the time and that still are, and they would have so much variety. They would have everything from like really noisy, edgy, weird punk rock bands, and then they would have like jazz groups. They would have choral vocal groups. I mean, you name it. They even had a big band at one point, and they would have, I mean, the gamut of everything. I think they even had like some country stars, local, some national kind of country alt rock stars, that were touring artists. I mean, they had everything, every style of music. They had electronic music. I mean, you name it, hip hop, so many different things. And they had this festival for a few years in Belfast, and then it eventually kind of faded, unfortunately. But then Meg Charette started this other festival called the All Roads Festival, which kind of took the place of this festival. And it basically was kind of modeled off of that in a lot of ways, as far as where it was a 2 day festival. They had, multiple venues set up, and then the Fridays, the Friday night and the Saturday night, they would usually do a big show where they would have, more popular bands or bigger bands that had a bigger draw. And it would be, a pretty cool thing. And it was mostly centered on the, kind of showcasing Maine talent. The thing that was a little bit different with this festival, it still had a lot of variety, but it didn't quite have the variety of the Free Range Festival. There wasn't this newer kind of incarnation of that festival was kind of, I feel overall was probably geared towards a little bit more of the indie rock crowd. But that being said, they had hip hop, they had electronic music, a lot of folk, and then they had some, kind of noisy rock bands that would play, lots of, acoustic music. But it was all kind of under that umbrella of like kind of indie rock. But they still had a lot of variety, and still the main focus of it was playing for these artists to kind of bring their own original material to the table. Really, really, really just kind of awesome, because the showcase and the focus of the All Roads Festival is the artist presenting their calling card and having it all based on original music. And so pretty awesome. The whole kind of their whole the platform that they presented to showcase original music, which I'm all about. And I love that there is so much talent in this state, and even locally, that they can, there's so much to choose from. So this year, and we just were able to announce, we weren't able to talk about it for a couple of weeks or so, but I was able to get my band Quantum. We're gonna play at it, so we got picked to play at this festival. So super excited to be playing at it, and it's been kind of an interesting development, because we just confirmed that we're going to be doing, instead of just the one night, we're going to be doing 2 dates at the festival, and which I'm super excited about. I'm not aware of bands really being able to do that at this festival. I've always, and I could be wrong, but from what I've seen and from I've gone to the festival before, and from what I gather, bands basically get the one slot either a Friday or Saturday night or during the day, and then if you're a headlining band and you have a bigger name, those bands will play a little bit longer sometimes and play on the main stage. They usually have multiple venues all set up around the town. But as things worked out, which is really awesome, I'm super excited. We're going to be playing the Friday of the opening night of the festival, and it's going to be May 19th, which will be at Marshall Wharf. We're going to be playing there at 9:45. So I'm super excited. Marshall Wharf is an amazing place. The coolest bar, probably the coolest spot in all of Belfast. Amazing beer, amazing atmosphere. So we're going to be doing a set there at Marshall Wharf on May 19th. And then also, we just booked another show for the same festival. We're going to be playing at the Underground Lounge on that Saturday, which is May 19th or May 20th. So we'll be playing on Saturday. We will be playing at the Underground Lounge, which is part of the Maskers Theater, which is a brand new venue that just opened this or last year now. Brand new venue that just opened, which is an amazing spot, really cool spot. I got the chance to play a gig there a few months back, and then I've been to a couple of shows, at least one or two shows there since then, and it's a really cool venue. So super excited. So we're going to be doing a 4 o'clock slot there on that Saturday. So super excited. So we got some things coming up for Quantum, and and again, that's the coolest thing about what this festival really represents. And again, I have nothing against bands that do covers because, I still am. I'm still part of that. There are projects that I'm still involved in where we do covers, but the big thing for me and the big kind of transitional thing I've gone through over the years is most of the projects that I work with now and that I'm involved with are all like original based projects. So that's something that I really really think is important because at the end of the day it's if you like it or you might not like it, it might be your cup of tea or might not be your cup of tea. It's that original material is that for that artist is that material that they're presenting is their calling card. So that's what I think at the end of the day that's kind of what you're known for, and you might like it, you might not, but it's there to fully to be presented. And I just think that's awesome because I think at the end of the day a band, no matter what style that they're doing, that's what is going to be ultimately what they leave behind, kind of their legacy, or could determine as a fan of if you like that particular band, if you want to seek that band out, because at the end of the day, if their material is strong that they write and it's good, you're going to want to see that band no matter what. So that's the awesome thing about the All Roads Festival is the focus of it is that calling card that's being presented by all original artists. So super excited about that. And again, it was just announced about I think like 2 days ago, and then today we just booked this other show, this other slot at the same festival. So super excited. And we will with the season coming, we have plans, and depending on how everything goes and what kind of what that entails, we're talking about releasing our second part of our albums this year. In June of last year, we released In Dreams I Saw Chapter 1, and when we recorded that album, we recorded a lot of new material, and originally the idea was that it was going to be a double album, but we decided to break it up, and so we divided the albums we recorded 2 full-length albums, and we decided to break them up and have Chapter 1 come out, which came out in June, and then we have the second album, which is all ready to go because it was recorded all at the same time. It was all mixed and mastered at the same time as well. The artwork, all those things were done all at the same time. So now we have another full-length album, which is In Dreams I Saw Chapter 2, which is basically just kind of on the sidelines and just it's ready to go. So we're in discussion mode now about putting that out this year. depending on how the season goes and opportunities that present themselves. So really excited about that. It's nice having music that's ready to go and music that I'm happy with and proud of, and that I think is it's all we got to do is put it out there. So I'm really excited about the prospect of that, and we'll see how things go this year with those kinds of developments. It could be a lot of fun. And so today's show, the main focus of this show is I haven't for Film Fanatic for this channel, I haven't really done too much coverage or too many videos on TV shows. I do love TV shows. There are a few shows that I really, really love. I've talked about them, and eventually I'm going to be doing a show on them. I've done on my Facebook page, Film Fanatic, when I was doing the live when I was doing the live videos, and I was doing like live reviews, and did a couple of interviews. I know I did some coverage and some videos on one or two TV shows. One that I know I did a show on, which is my all-time favorite show, is the first season of True Detective. That is my all-time favorite TV show, hands down. It's my favorite and that show came out about 7 or 8 years ago now, which is hard to believe, so I kind of still consider it, a more modern show, and there's a lot of older television shows too, but there's so many, especially now. But I have to say that True Detective is my all-time favorite television show. Just amazing. I can put that in, and it's one season, and I can put that in and just watch it all the way through. And it's about, comes out to lengthwise 6 to 7 hours, but it's such a hypnotic show that I can the minute I put it in, I'm just in it to win it. The other show that I really, really love, that's one of my favorite television shows, is the Manhunt, the hunt for the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. Same kind of thing, where that show is just like True Detective. It's one season, and it's compared to a lot of other television shows, it's pretty short. It's about 6 or 7 hours. It's more or less like watching, maybe 2 or 3 movies back to back, or watching a trilogy of movies. It's like the thing with a lot of other television shows that I find, and there's so many great ones, is that they tend to go on and on and on for numerous years and numerous seasons. And I have a problem with, after I watch a season of a show, and if it goes on for a couple of years, case in point, shows like Game of Thrones, or Luther is another show with Idris Elba. Really, really great shows, fantastic shows, but they're so lengthy that I have this hard problem staying with it. Whereas these other shows that I mentioned, True Detective and Manhunter, they just there's something about it where they're really concise, and there's a very strong conclusion to it, to that season or to that story, and it doesn't go on, and you don't have to invest thousands of hours in those characters, and you don't there's not that kind of ham-handed or cheesy thing of where there's going to be these cliched cliffhangers thrown into television and thrown into with the show to keep you watching, which is another thing I don't like about television. Is it feels like that's, even if the show's really good, I have a problem sometimes when you get to the first or second season, and they have to throw in these like kind of stereotypical cliffhangers, even if the show is really, really good, and they just have to do that to keep you hooked. Whereas I just feel like at that point I start getting really fatigued and I'm tired, because I feel like the story should kind of naturally unfold, the story should naturally conclude, and it feels like when a lot of these shows are, when you're watching them, and again, really, really great television shows there's so many, But then it gets into that point of where, well, okay, the producers or the writers are like, well, we have to throw this in because we got to keep people watching and keep making money with this production. And I just feel like it always turns me off as a viewer. I just feel like the show, if the story is really well done, you know, I think it takes on a life of its own, and it will naturally reach its own conclusion. But when those things happen, it's the the company or the the creators that are kind of making it or forcing things to kind of happen. So, but this show today is on a television show that was a integral part of my youth. It it totally I feel fits in with a lot of the movies that I cover here. Most of the movies that I cover on Film Fanatic on this page are movies that are in the 70s and 60s. I've been doing a lot of films lately that are from the 60s, late 60s, mid 60s, late 60s, definitely the 70s. That's probably the biggest decade that I cover, and especially the 80s, where I mostly do shows on the real low budget exploitation movies. That's my favorite style. That's my jam. I always try to bring variety. I love all kinds of movies, but that's still kind of where I always just naturally gravitate towards that. I just did a show the other day on Apocalypse Now, Redux, and I just watched it last night, and that is easily the best, my most prized possession, as far as being a fan, but as a collector for Blu-rays. To me, it's the greatest Blu-ray experience I have, and that I've ever seen. And the package, it's got hours and hours. I finished watching it again last night on Blu-ray, and now I'm watching all the special features, and it's just amazing. It's the most gorgeous package ever. I mean, there's like 7 to 8 hours of just special features, just amazing. But one of my first television shows that I saw as a kid, and I just so fell in love with it, and I still love it, is The Master. This is such an old school television show from 1984. I was maybe 9 or 10 years old when I was a kid, and I used to watch this show, and I was obsessed. At that point, I was exposed to a lot of, really awesome horror movies. It was during the time I was watching Friday the 13th. I was obsessed with all those movies, that franchise. I was exposed to a lot of amazing slasher films at the time. Movies like Maniac, and then a lot of it, classic Italian horror films, movies by Lucio Fulci, movies like The Tourist Trap, The Car, just so many great low budget exploitation movies, mostly in the horror world. But I also was really into martial arts movies. I was really into lots of movies that were put out by this company in the 80s that was called Canon. And Canon specialized, I kind of consider them to be an exploitation label, because I kind of feel their whole mode of operation kind of fit, in that world. And they were responsible for putting out all kinds of, really cheesy martial arts movies, particularly ninja movies. Sho Kosugi was one of the famous actors of that time, and he was basically in every production that they put out. I did a review on one of the Canon movies. That was the movie that introduced me to that whole, like, kind of ninja, if you want to call it ninja exploitation world. Ninja 3: The Domination, and Sho Kosugi was in that. And Canon was that company. But they released probably a dozen ninja movies during the early 80s to the mid 80s. American Ninja. There was like a whole trilogy around that. There was like 3 or 4 movies, and then they had Revenge of the Ninja, Enter the Ninja, Ninja 3: The Domination, all kinds of other movies. But Canon, and they also did movies that were not. Canon also did other films that were not necessarily, martial arts or ninja exploitation movies, but most of their movies were always like really cheesy and kind of terrible, but just kind of awesome. Uh, so I was really steeped in that world, along with a lot of the horror films that I grew up on. And this was a TV show that came out of that. And Sho Kosugi, like I mentioned, this was a regular television show. It was on, I believe, it was on NBC, and this was a childhood obsession. This show, and last year, a good, really great friend of mine who, and his name is Kevin Brooks, who I've known him for so long. We kind of reconnected the last couple of years through Facebook. We grew up together pretty much, and we played in bands together, and we also did a lot of martial arts together. We had a long history, and we reconnected on Facebook a few years back. And when I started this page, when I started doing more Film Fanatic videos, we started talking more and more about movies, and last year he brought this up, that he said that he had this whole set. This is the complete series of the Master, and he said that he had it, and he had, like, I think a Blu-ray version of it or something, and he said he offered to just give it to me, and I was like, really, wow, like, and I was like, that would be amazing. So he ended up sending it to me, and he gave it to me, and it's the full series. It's got I think that it was on for like 2 or 3. I think it was on for 3 years. And so he sent it to me in the mail, and it's just amazing. Like, and it's so, again, I feel like this is like kind of pure exploitation in a lot of ways, because it's so, to me, it's amazing that this was like a regular series. It was a very popular television show at the time. I was obsessed with this show as a kid. Um, and it's so low budget. It's so cheesy and unbelievably terrible at times. The writing is terrible, but some of the action is just spectacular. And obviously, I love this show so much because, out of nostalgic reasons, because it was such a part of my youth. Like this show, and then also The Incredible Hulk was another show starring Lou Ferrigno. Those were probably my favorite two television shows that I grew up on. And I'll eventually probably do a show on The Incredible Hulk. Just, that's amazing too. But this was such a fun ride, and watching it now, so many freaking years later, I thought, like, well, maybe this would be kind of unwatchable. Maybe it's so bad it's like, just really bad. But I found myself loving it, even with because I have such a nostalgic connection to this show, and it was such a part of my youth. I found myself just enjoying it. It's so much fun. It's so utterly ridiculous. It's so cheesy, but it's great. I mean, it stars, iconic, two of the most iconic actors. I mean, Lee Van Cleef. I mean, just an amazing actor. He was in a lot of the Sergio Leone movies in the '60s and '70s. He was in a lot of great exploitation movies. Um, there's this crime exploitation movie that is such a badass movie that I'm gonna do a show on, and it was a movie that was really, really influential on Quentin Tarantino's movie Reservoir Dogs, and it's called Kansas City, and it's a real down and dirty kind of crime exploitation movie, and Lee Van Cleef was in the star in that movie, and it's really good. It's kind of like a film noir. It's super violent, super dark. Um, and he made so many great, like, spaghetti westerns in the '70s. I mean, he's an iconic actor. He's one of the greats. Um, and this was a television show that he was like the star in, and he plays like an older ninja kind of master. And of course, Sho Kosugi, who I mentioned before, was in, probably dozens, if not more, ninja movies in the '80s that were all released through Canon. And Sho Kosugi in that world is looked at as, like, kind of like what Bruce Campbell is, for instance, from the Evil Dead movies. Bruce Campbell is looked at as like a horror icon for all of his work in the horror world, particularly around, the the Sam Raimi movies and the franchise, and he's also done many other movies. But he's a legend in that field, and I feel like Sho Kosugi is the same kind of figure, but in the world of the whole like ninja craze that happened in the '80s. And he's still around. He's still going. But I love this show to death. And watching it now as an older guy, it's still fantastic. And I really have to give a big shout out to Kevin Brooks for sending me this. I just love this. And this show starred Tim Van Patten, who is like the sidekick in this, who is like the guy who is training under Lee Van Cleef to be a student, and he's such a goofy, like terrible character, but just so awesome at the same time. Uh, and of course, Lee Van Cleef, the legend, uh, just just so many. Like I mentioned a few seconds ago, just so many movies he was involved in. For a few dollars more, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Sabata. Um, he was in the other movie, which I cannot forget to mention, Escape from New York, John Carpenter's masterpiece. Um, just amazing. The Big Gun Down, Return of Simbada, High Noon, 1952, Day of Anger, The Grand Duel. Just so many movies he was in. He was like, I think he was like, a legend, especially in the world of westerns, but so many other movies too. One of my favorite movies. I mean, The Good, the Bad, and Ugly is just amazing. I eventually want to do some Sergio Leone films because he's one of my favorites. Those are my favorite style. That's my favorite style of western, of the western genre. But I probably my favorite role that Lee Van Cleef ever played was in Escape from New York. I mean, he's just so amazing and so badass in that movie. Um, and he was older. He passed away quite a few years ago, but he was older when he made the show, and he still had that power on screen. He still was like, he was still a badass. Uh, he still had that command. When he was on the big screen. Um, and Timothy Van Patten, who is the sidekick, he's done lots of different things. He was a director. He's directed a bunch of films. He's been a screenwriter for lots of different films. Um, he's done quite a few things, and that's always the interesting thing with revisiting a lot of these older movies that I grew up watching as a kid, or television shows, or checking out a lot of newer films in those respective genres, particularly in the more low budget exploitation world. It's amazing seeing how diverse a lot of these actors, a lot of their careers are. Some of the movies that Tim Van Patten was involved with was The Pacific, also The Boardwalk Empire, which is a really great show with Steve Buscemi, which is pretty recent. He was also involved with the newer Perry Mason series. He directed a couple episodes of Perry Mason. It's pretty wild. Black Mirror, which is another really great show. Great show. El Dorado. Just a real diverse career. And he got his start in this, super low budget, kind of cheesy TV show, but just fantastic. Just fantastic. Uh, Bill Conti did the music. The music for this show is just, well, it's just iconic. I mean, and Bill Conti was an American composer. He did so many movies in the 70s and 80s. He did the score for The Karate Kid, for Your Eyes Only, The Big Chill, The Right Stuff. Uh, I mean, so many things. He's like been nominated for Academy Awards. He's won a few. And this set is awesome. And again, I have to really thank Kevin Brooks for sending me this because it's all seasons, and it's like 3 years worth of seasons. And because the show is super entertaining and super light, it's pretty easy to get through. Even though there's a lot of episodes with this whole collection, and it was on for 3 years, it's so campy and kind of light, but yet it's still super entertaining. It makes it pretty easy to get through and to just watch and to just kind of coast through it. But it's great. It's so awesome. And it came out in 1984. And again, this was a real popular show when it hit television. It was definitely one. It was, the Hulk was the first television show I used to watch religiously as a kid. And then it was also this show. Eventually, I was into like shows like the A Team and things like that. But the Hulk and the Master were my two favorite television shows. I have the most of the collection of the Hulk, the original television show, and I still love that to death. And I'm gonna eventually do a show on that at some point. But this was such an integral part of my youth as a kid. Such a cheesy, uh, great time. And if you're in for some a good treat of just pure entertainment, I highly recommend this show. It's kind of the epitome of '80s and everything '80s. Like, it's just great. So, thanks again for your support, and get a chance to see this. I'm sure this is a DVD collection, and I'm sure it's available on 4K now. Wouldn't be surprised, or Blu-ray. I'm sure you can find it on all the streaming services. But if you're in a mood for something that's kind of brainless but super entertaining and a whole lot of fun, definitely check out this series, The Master. Amazing stuff. So this is Jason Dean. So thanks again for your support. If you like this channel, please like and subscribe to it, and we will see you next time. Peace.